In the Old Testament, there is an interesting story about a man by the name of Samson. He is the biblical Hercules when you read the Old Testament. He's a man of superhuman strength who nonetheless cannot escape tragedy. He seems to just shoot himself in the foot again and again and again. His story is found in the book of Judges, chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16. Just a little background, he's the last of the major judges who led the Israelites, but he is not a great example to follow. Nobody holds Samson up and says, walk like him. He was a disaster. He breaks vows. He marries outside of the people of Israel twice. He functions really more as a vigilante than as a leader. You want somebody killed, Samson will kill him, but you want it to go about it in any kind of diplomatic way, he doesn't really know what he's doing. He is a flawed hero for sure. You might remember that Samson had supernatural strength that was tied to the fact that his hair had never been touched with a razor. Do you remember the story? His mother had taken a vow, a Nazirite vow for him, so a razor had never touched his hair, and the Bible said that gave him supernatural strength. He was a mighty warrior who defeated the Philistines time and time again, but he had this problem about self-management. It escaped him. He just couldn't get that part together. He did not know how to control himself. His victories were certainly great. During his wedding to a Philistine woman, Samson was so humiliated by her, the Bible says that he killed 1,000 Philistine men by himself. He killed 1,000 Philistine men. His successes were great, but his failures were greater. He fell in love with a woman named Delilah. You might remember the story. The rulers of the Philistines bribed her. We want to discover the secret of Samson's amazing strength. And so 3 different times she says, Samson, please, sweetheart, tell me what makes you so strong. 3 times he makes up a story. 3 times she goes and tells the Philistines, this is it. Then she tries what he says is going to sap his strength, and it doesn't sap his strength, and so she's getting really embarrassed. And look on the screen, this is what happens in chapter 16, verse 15. Then Delilah pouted. I like that. How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You've made fun of me 3 times now, and you still haven't told me what makes you so strong. She tormented him with her nagging day after day until he was sick to death of it. I like these modern translations. It's just really, he's just sick to death of it. Finally, Samson shared his secret with her. My hair has never been cut, he confessed, for I was dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as anybody else. And then he dozes off to sleep. She goes and tells the Philistines while he is asleep. She cuts his hair. The Philistines come into the room. She wakes him up, and he has no strength because he has told her his great secret. Verse 21, so the Philistines captured him, and they gouged out his eyes, and they took him to Gaza, where he was bound with bronze chains and forced to grind grain in the prison. His story was tragic. His story was tragic, and is a perfect picture of someone who never learned to practice self-management. Another scripture, this is from the New Testament, Galatians chapter 5. Paul writes, the Holy Spirit produces fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and, say it with me, self-control. Paul said there's no law against these things. The Bible is clear. Practicing self-control is an important part of becoming the best people we can be. So last week we introduced the subject of emotional intelligence. For those who weren't here, I'd encourage you to go back and watch the video on a YouTube or on our Village Facebook page or Village website page. But the idea was, social scientists over the last 20 years have been saying your IQ is not what makes you successful. You can have high IQ and still miss it in most areas of life. It is something called your emotional intelligence that more times than not determines your success. And we said that that perfectly matches the Bible. The Bible says for all of us to understand and love God, but then to be able to love ourselves and then to be able to love other people, that is a beautiful place to be. And all through the Bible, it talks about this idea of knowing how to do that. knowing how to do it with our words, knowing how to do it with our deeds, knowing how to, it just flows out of our lives. We said that is a picture of emotional intelligence. And we introduced a man by the name of Daniel Goleman. He wrote the book on emotional intelligence back in 1995. And Goleman said, and we talked about it last week, that there are 4 skills in emotional intelligence. And you ought to check yourself on these things, because I'm hoping some of you say, sheesh, I missed that one, or I missed that one, and then you'll put your mind to maybe correcting it. These 4 skills are this: self-awareness. We talked about that last week. Self-management. We'll talk about that today. Others awareness, and then relationship management. Last week, just to refresh your memory quickly, we talked about self-awareness. That means learning to recognize, feel, and process your emotions. We said emotions are natural, they're a part of our life, but a self-aware person is able to process, think about, feel the emotions they're supposed to feel. We said last week, self-awareness includes knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and being okay with that. There are some things you're strong at, there's some things you're weak at, but a self-aware person knows this and is able to walk comfortably in that. They're not freaked out because they're weak in some areas. They're not boastful because they're strong in some areas. They just know in life they have gifts and talents and strengths, and they have some weaknesses. And then we also said self-awareness includes receiving and processing well-constructed or constructive criticism. And that's a tough one, but we said that's really a part of emotional intelligence, is being able to handle criticism when it is given to you. This week, we're going to talk about self-management. In other words, it's good to be aware of who you are and how you're feeling, but it can't stop there. For you to be emotionally intelligent, you have to actually learn to manage yourself. You can't continually, as Samson did, shoot yourself in the foot and be considered an emotionally healthy person. It is the problem that most of us have struggles with. I don't have too many problems figuring out what y'all need to do. I know what y'all need to do. My problem is in managing what I need to do. Managing this 5'11", 200 and something pound person, that is my problem. How do I manage me? And that's what I want to talk about. Now, if you want a definition, here's a good definition. Self-management, because that's what we're talking about, self-management. We're looking at it against the backdrop of Samson as an example of someone who didn't get it. But you're going to get it. We're going to get it. We're tired of shooting ourselves in the foot, right? We don't want to do that anymore. And by the way, how many of us have shot ourselves in the foot numerous times by not practicing self-management? Anybody? All of us, right? We've done it. Tired of it. Don't want to do it anymore. Here's a good definition. Self-management is concerned with how you control and manage yourself and your emotions, your inner resources, and your abilities. It also includes your ability to manage your impulses. And this is very important. The self-management we're going to talk about today contains 6 competencies, 6 things that kind of determine whether you actually have a good handle on self-management. So I want you on each one of these to grade yourself. I want you to look at your life and say, when I talk about a competency concerning self-management, I want you to say, how am I doing with that? 1 means I'm a disaster at that. Or 10, maybe I'm getting that part of self-management is becoming real for me. I'm understanding and I'm handling it. And at the end of the service, I don't want this to be a defeatist thing. At the end of the service, I want us to ask God for help. I want you to know He's not mad at you if you blow all of these. If you're a disaster at all of these, He's not mad at you. He just wants better for you. And He wants you to know you can experience better. You really can. You don't have to settle. And so that's what I hope we're going to do, okay? Are you with me? So let's jump in. Competency number 1, self-management means keeping my emotions under control. Self-management means keeping my emotions under control. Sometimes it's okay to let emotions control us, especially when it's positive emotions. I get that. Your excitement and joy at passing an exam, how exciting that is, or achieving a target if you're in sales for the month. You just get all excited passing some wonderful goal that you've set. It's wonderful. It's great to be happy and exhilarated and just on the cloud because of that happy emotion. But what I'm talking about is when we are controlled by negative emotions, such as anger or fear or frustration. Those things have to learn to be controlled or they will sabotage your life. Part of self-management is learning how to keep negative emotions under control. It really is a key to good living. When you learn how to control your impulses, it will lead to a much happier, more successful life. Now, here's a story that many of you have heard, but Goleman uses it in 2 of his books. He uses it in his emotional intelligence book, and he also uses the story in Working with Emotional Intelligence, and it has to do with children and a marshmallow experiment. Are you familiar with that? It's a very famous study. It was done in the 1960s. It's been repeated in every decade since. In this experiment, started in the 60s, a group of 4-year-old children were offered 1 marshmallow to eat immediately, or we'll give you 2 marshmallows. If you can just hold on just a minute, we're gonna have to go to another room. It'll be a few minutes, but when we come back, we'll give you 2 marshmallows if you don't eat the 1. But you can eat the 1, but if you eat the 1, that's it, or you can hold on and you can wait for 2. Obviously, some children couldn't resist and impulsively ate the marshmallow, while others were able to wait 15, 20 minutes, and then they were given 2 marshmallows. Now, when they followed up with these children, this was a longitudinal study, when they followed up with these children, it was remarkable what they discovered. There were clear differences between the 2 groups of kids. These kids grew up into adults, and it was amazing what their results showed. The children that waited for the second marshmallow were shown to be more intellectually skilled, more responsible, and more dependable, and more attentive as adults than the group that could not resist the marshmallow. They formed better relationships. They demonstrated better self-control in frustrating situations. They seemed to be very, very, very healthy adults. Those who ate the marshmallow first as children tended to be adults that were more easily distracted and less dependable as adults. They had lower intellectual abilities and struggled to control emotions during stress. They continued to react impulsively to situations and couldn't delay gratification in reaching their goals. Goleman, in these studies, believes this experiment shows that learning to control impulse leads to greater success in life. Again, that was one of Samson's struggles. He never learned to control his impulse, and because of that, he married often, and he married wrong, and he did impulsive things because he never learned how to manage these negative things that would happen to him. Now, some people do this very well. Some people are amazing at this. They know how to delay having a difficult conversation until the timing is just right. They know the importance of being mature. They really, in their life, they do it right a lot. But then they have these blow-ups that just seem to come from nowhere. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? You don't have to raise your hand for yourself, but you've seen it in other people, right? And you can be saying it for yourself too, right? Goleman calls this the amygdala hijack. The amygdala hijack. He coined the term based on the work of neuroscientists by the name of Joseph Ledoux. And here's how it works, just to give you a little brain chemistry understanding. Under normal circumstances, you process information through your neocortex or thinking brain. That's where logic happens. So it's really important to know. Your thinking brain, that's the neocortex. The neocortex then routes the information to the amygdala, which is a small organ that lies deep in the center of your emotional brain. But on occasion, there is a short circuit whereby the thinking brain is bypassed and signals are sent straight to the emotional brain. This happens because in the earliest civilizations, the earliest periods of any kind of human understanding, our emotional brain sometimes needed to be triggered immediately, right? Because a wild animal was about to get us, and so it just goes straight to the amygdala. It short circuits the thinking part of your brain. It's just emotion, fight, flight. That's what you have to do. You have to make the decision right then and there, right? You know what I'm talking about. But when that happens now and you short circuit your thinking brain and go straight to the emotional brain, if you don't learn to pause, then that fight or flight happens and you either say something that you hate that you said, or you lash out and you grab something that you didn't mean to grab, or you jump out of the car when you didn't mean to jump out of the car, or you do something that is so outside of you, but it's called the amygdala hijack. Everybody follow what I'm talking about? It happens all the time. You need to understand what to do when this happens. An amygdala hijack occurs, if you want to write down a little definition, when people exhibit an emotional response that is immediate, that is overwhelming, and is way out of measure with the normal stimulus. You just look at it and you say, where did that come from? What was that all about? Now, you can't be emotionally healthy if you are practicing amygdala hijack. If that is a part of your life, because you can do everything right, but I'm telling you, especially if you're a leader and then you have one of these outbursts, it sets you back years because people don't expect to see that in us. They expect us to have better control. Again, I know leaders who do it right most of the time, but they occasionally will lose their temper in a way that is not helpful, in a way that is not thought out. They lose their temper, and when they do, it hurts them and their credibility in front of their team. Goldman calls the amygdala hijack adult temper tantrums. Adult temper tantrums. One of the most famous amygdala hijacks occurred in a sporting event. How many are sports fans? You have some sports fans, okay. This was in a sporting event back in 2006, and it's a sport that most of us in the South don't follow, but I think that's beginning to change a little bit. It was in the World Cup. The World Cup, which is soccer, was being played, the championships were being played in Germany, and France and Italy were playing for the championship. And the captain of the French national team was the great Zinedine Zidane. Is that not the greatest name in the history of sports? Zinedine Zidane. Say that with me. Zinedine Zidane. He was the best of the best. He was an elite playmaker. He was renowned for his elegance on the field, his vision, his ball control, his technique. Zidane was named the best European footballer of the past 50 years. We're talking about Michael Jordan of soccer. We're talking about the greatest of the greatest of the greatest, Zinedine Zidane. He is widely regarded as one of the greatest, with Pelé and a couple of others, one of the greatest footballers in the history of the world. This year, 2006, he came out of retirement to help his team, the French team. They were really not very good. They had made the World Cup. They were going to get to play in the tournament, but they were not very good. But suddenly, Zidane was magic. He was magic. This is an elegant man playing soccer. It is beautiful to watch. They began to win. The whole country of France was just on its ear. Nobody could believe what was happening, and they made it all the way to the final game against Italy. The game was tied 1-1. It was near the end of the game. Everybody was on eggshells. It was just unbelievable watching what's going to happen. Whoever wins this is going to be the champions of the world. Zidane has been playing beautifully. And then this happened.
Now Materazzi did what? This is going to give us a bit more of a clue. He said something? He certainly said something. Now what happens? He's saying some more. Well, the pictures tell the story. He leaves football in disgrace. And he leaves his team in big trouble. France down to 10 men. And the showpiece of the World Game has an unsavoury moment here. It will make the headlines beyond the result, I feel.
So in 1 second, Zinedine Zidane changed everything because he lost his cool. What did the guy say to him? You saw the guy talking to him. The guy said something to him about his sister. And normally in competitions, Zidane's heard that kind of stuff all of his life. But for this particular moment in time, he didn't have the brakes on to say, pause, wait a minute, don't react. This is the World Cup. We're going to get through this. Be the bigger man. Choose your timing. Choose what's right. He just let the amygdala hijack take place, headbutted the guy, was kicked out of the game. The other team ended up in penalty shots, ended up winning, and France went home, the loser. Amygdala hijack. It basically equates to freaking out or seriously overreacting to something that's happening in your life. Jesus had spoken for 3 years about the fact that his kingdom was going to be the kingdom of love. This is the kingdom of love, you guys. This is what we are in, the kingdom of love. We don't fight the way the others fight. In fact, we are only going to fight with love. That's the only thing that we're going to use as our weapon. And we don't hate the enemy. Everybody else hates the enemy. We love the enemy. Does everybody get it? Yes, we get it. Jesus praying in the garden the night before he is arrested, or the night he is arrested, right before he's crucified. And the Roman soldiers come to the garden. Judas betrays him. Simon Peter sees what's happening. What does he do? He pulls out a sword and he cuts somebody's ear off. What's that? Amygdala hijack. He has forgotten everything Jesus has said to him for 3 years. He has forgotten all the lessons. It doesn't matter. Amygdala hijack. I'm going to freak out. I'm going to just go to my basic instincts, fight or flight. I'm going to fight. I've got a sword. Cut the ear off. Jesus said, put the sword back, Simon. That's not how we do it. I remember raising my kids, and I remember there were moments when I just would overreact. And it was like, this warranted this, but I responded with this. Any of you parents, can you relate at all? It's much better to be older and say, boy, that was a long time ago. But there were moments when you just feel like, God, I can't believe that. Amygdala hijack or adult temper tantrum. Same thing, adult temper tantrum. So what do you do if you have the amygdala hijack potential? Let me give you quickly some things. I try to stay in the present. What I mean by that, when I feel that emotion hit me, and it can be somebody cuts me off in traffic, it can be somebody says something to me that just hits me wrong, then I can feel physically things begin to change in me. I can feel my voice, which normally is a strong voice. I can feel that it begins to get a little shaky. I can just feel, if my voice gets shaky, something is stirring inside of me. I begin to feel something here. We begin to notice a change. Something is happening. And what I have to do is I have to remind myself, stay present. Stay present. Evaluate what is happening. I feel this right now. I feel it in my stomach. I feel my voice is beginning to quiver. And this is the time when I am the most dangerous. But I don't want to be dangerous. I want to walk in love. So I need to say, okay, I feel myself tensing up. I need to be present. I need to remember where I am. I'm in the World Cup. Zinedine, I'm in the World Cup. You don't headbutt somebody in the World Cup where every TV camera gets it, where there's no chance you're going to get away with it. He forgot where he was. So you got to remember and try to stay present. Second thing, I try to let go of the story. By that, I mean the story that's circulating in our brain. It locks us in a strange way. This might be the most difficult part of the practice, but we need to completely let go of our thinking and judging mind, at least for a moment. Now, this is a very challenging step because when we feel threatened, the mind immediately starts running this story. I'm pretty sure Zinedine was running a story. He said something about my sister. Nobody says anything about my sister. I can't believe he's saying this about my sister. It just locks on this story. Stop the story. Stop the story. You have to be willing to forget the story for just a minute because there is a feedback loop that is happening that is going to put you under a bus. So you got to say, stop. I got to stop this. Stop. Just for a moment. If the negative thoughts persist, and they will persist, you're going to have some strong things to overcome. So just stop the story for just a moment. Third thing, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. When I have that happen and my whole body begins to tense up, rather than lash out, I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Some people tell me they have road rage. I don't have road rage. But I know some people on the road do crazy things. I understand that. But most times, I try to give people benefit of the doubt. If somebody's trying to get in front of me and I feel like they haven't waited their turn, I try to think about stuff like maybe they're late for a job interview, or maybe they just found out their mom is sick and they got to get to the hospital, or I don't know. So I want to give people the benefit of the doubt rather than, oh, no, you're not going to get in front of me. That seems like that's short-sighted. It seems like I would rather err on the side of giving them benefit of the doubt. Same thing with a child. I try to say when a child spills something, whatever, how many of us have overreacted when the truth is they're children. They're children. Give them the benefit of the doubt. This is just something that happens. I try to delay my response. In other words, those hasty emails that we write when we are furious because somebody has offended us, never send those emails. Never, never, never send those emails. Sleep on it, read it the next day, you'll delete it, you'll say, thank you, God, for letting me have some wisdom here. That was not the way I should have responded. At least 6 seconds. It takes 6 seconds for your brain to catch up. it's in those first 6 seconds that you have to exercise real restraint, because if not, you'll be in trouble. And then I try to remind myself to just breathe. Again, I'm talking about when somebody has offended me, somebody has hurt me, somebody has enraged me. I try to remember to breathe. And the keys to breathing is to make sure that it's smooth breathing. And I try to inhale over a period of time and exhale and try to have a rhythm going. And it just allows me to kind of settle down. So a lot of times, and this is things that you'll see, if you go to seminars, this is things they'll teach you. Just kind of inhale deeply. Let's inhale for a count of 4 and then exhale with a count of 6, okay? Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. You'll be amazed at what that does for you. It quiets, just like this room. Can you feel I feel like we're, number one, in rhythm with each other right now, which is really nice. But number two, there is a deeper quiet at this moment than we had a few moments ago, a soul quiet. And it happens, and you can do this when the amygdala hijack is coming your way. Or you can jump out of a car and do something foolish. Or you can grab somebody by the throat and do something foolish. Or you can say something that you will regret the rest of your life. And don't think that sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never harm you. You say it, and it will be remembered the rest of your life. So you have those moments to stop, reflect, breathe, let the loop stop, and be able to say what you need to say. Very, very important. That's the first thing. Emotionally healthy people who practice self-management learn how to control their emotions. They do not let their emotions control them. Second thing, and we'll move quickly, self-management means walking in integrity or honesty and acting congruently or in harmony with my values. If someone is wanting to really practice, grade yourself first. How are you doing on that emotional, managing your emotions? How are you doing? Give yourself 1 to 10. Talk about it with your partner or a friend on your way home from church. Don't get into a fight and have an amygdala hijack. Don't do that, but just talk about it and see if what you're feeling is the truth. Second thing, self-management means walking in integrity and acting congruently with my values. Jesus talked a lot about the hypocrite, but so many of us have lived that life, not just in church, but in every area of life, always putting a mask on. I wear a mask when I'm with this group that says I'm like you, and I wear a mask when I'm with this group that says I'm like you, but I'm really nothing like the mask. There comes a point in time in a healthy, emotionally healthy person's life when they say, you know what, this is me. This is me, and I'm going to live my life congruently with what I value. To do it any other way is exhausting. We need to learn to take the mask off. To be able to take the mask off and say, this is me. This is the life that I am living, and my lifestyle is going to match what I say my values are. Here's what I know about me. At my core, I believe these things. I believe all people are to be loved and respected. If I'm around someone who chooses to disrespect somebody else, waiter or a waitress in a restaurant, and I don't say anything, I feel like I have done something against my very nature, against my value, what is important to me. I read this morning somebody went to a family gathering and the conversation about David Duke came up and found out the family was supportive of David Duke. And David Duke, if you remember, ran for senator in Louisiana, but before that had been the grand wizard of the KKK and just somebody that you would not want to support. But it violated a person's values. And they got up and they left because they didn't want to have a meal with people who were championing that kind of racist rhetoric. They didn't want to be with those people. And so I appreciate that. So whatever your values are, you want to make sure that you live in a consistent way like that. And when you screw up and you do something against your values, you want to apologize quickly. If I'm in a circle with people and they say something that is disparaging about someone and I don't stop them. I want to apologize to them later and say, hey, I'm sorry, I should have said something. I'm sorry, I should have said something, but jokes about that's not cool. Or people that want to laugh at the way other people look. That's not cool. That's not the conversation that should go on in my house, and I didn't say something, and I should have said something. Being able to apologize comes easily if you are being true to who you are. Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said this about apology: it takes a great deal of character strength to apologize quickly out of one's heart rather than out of pity. A person must possess himself and have a deep sense of security and fundamental principles and values in order to genuinely apologize. And I'll tell you this, I look back on my kids growing up, and I know I did a lot of things wrong. And I look for sometimes those things right because they turned out pretty good. I mean, I'm real proud with how my kids turned out. I think, what did I do right? And one of the things I did right is when I would blow it, I apologized quickly to them. I would sit them down and say, I screwed up. I messed this up, and I'm sorry. It's me. And they gotten used to saying, Dad, we get it. No problem. We understand. But I think that was very helpful. Another thing, self-management. You want to learn how to have self-management? These practices that are really important. You have to control your emotions. That's true. But here's another thing you have to learn to do. Self-management means learning to be flexible. Learn to be flexible. In other words, don't be so rigid with your life. Learn how to live. A few weekends ago, some of y'all know this, a few weekends ago, I did something. If you had asked me, Ray, would you ever go fishing? I would have told you, heavens no. Why would I want to ever go fishing? Because my experience with fishing had been sitting out in a boat with a worm on the end of a hook for days and nothing ever happening. And I hated it. It didn't make any sense to me. But I had a friend in South Florida. Jane and I had dinner with he and his wife, and he said, you ought to come down. It's different. Deep sea fishing, you would love it. And I said, oh, man. I said yes, and then I said for 2 weeks to Jane, I'm hating this. I can't believe this. This is going to be horrible. I'm going to sit in a boat. It's going to be horrible. And it ended up not being horrible. It ended up being one of the greatest things I've ever done. Is there a picture of that? Is there a picture of the fish? Yeah, I had to find a way to put it in a sermon, you understand, so you could see the picture. You're going to hear fish stories now in every sermon about how I landed the great big fish. But you know what? It was so different for me. Was I nervous? Absolutely. When they said, now just pick it up and smile for the camera. It's like, it's still flopping around. It's like, can we shoot it in the head or something? I don't want to hold this thing while it's still flopping. But they said, just grab him. And it's like, y'all don't know. It was petrifying to me, having never done that. But, after 2 days, I'm taking the hook out. I'm just learning how to do all these things, and it was a different thing. But I think it says something to being flexible. Being flexible. Life is changing. It's changing. And being able to change is a big deal. Chinese proverb I like a lot. The wise adapt themselves to circumstances as water molds itself to the pitcher. That's how the wise live. They learn to mold themselves to the pitcher by adapting to life. I think about Charlottesville, and of course, so much of that is hate, but underneath, I believe there's a refusal of some to be flexible. They never could learn to evolve with the country evolving. And they hear these stories of a better day when whites were in control and whites owned it all and had it all. And somebody never progressed and realized that is a false narrative. That is a false story. When you say make America great again to my black brothers and sisters, they're saying, are y'all talking about the 1960s? Is that what y'all want to go back to? That wasn't the great time. That was a horrible time for many. So there's a need to learn to be flexible and to grow and to change. And a shout out to you. To be a part of our church, you have to be flexible. And you show that you are willing to stretch and do things differently and see things through a different lens, and that's a big deal. You should be commended. Jane and I want to take up yoga. And you know why? Because everything I read says as people get older, you get stiffer and you can't move as much. And I'm beginning to experience a little bit of that. And so we talk about we need to learn how to be flexible. And maybe yoga would help us physically. And if it would help us physically, then maybe there's a parallel for that. Maybe we need to, in emotional health, learn how to be flexible in our lives. Charles Darwin said it like this: it is not the strongest of the species that survives. It's not the most intelligent of the species that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Those are some true words. Those adaptable to change are the ones who survive. Well, quickly, self-management means making a commitment to continually grow and become better. If you want to practice self-management and you want it to really lead to emotional health, it means saying, I am committed to becoming a better person every day. I'm committed to learning and growing, and I'm not going to stop. I didn't get all the knowledge that I needed when I was 25 years old or when I left 12th grade or when I'm not going to do that. I'm going to every day be open to learning and growing and becoming a more complete person. And I love that. So many of you, you're still learning. You're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You're still learning. That's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. I want to keep growing spiritually. I've told you this before. It's funny to me that sometimes we want our faith to be the faith that we locked in on as a child. And that was important. That faith was important. But if you were still believing as a child when you're 30, 40, 50 years grown up, I don't think that's the idea. I don't think that's the idea. When Jesus says become his children, I don't think that's the idea. I think the idea is we are growing. We're asking deeper questions. Listen, when I first began the journey, my faith was very much like a cartoon book. You know the books that you see at doctor's offices in the old days, the Bible books? That was my Christianity. It was very much the Bible stories in the book, and it was written for children, and it was just this little story. But now it's a deeper, deeper faith. I don't get hung up on Samson and say, did he really kill 1,000 people by himself? I rather say the point of the story, Ray, is he was a man who had everything but lost it all because he didn't know self-management. That's what I get. I get deeper principles. The cartoons are fading away. Now it's about living in God's kingdom here, not about going to heaven when I die. That used to be all it was when I was a kid. I'm going to heaven when I die. Now it's about living in God's kingdom here. It's more love-centered. It's recognizing that there is a power of fear in my life, and I need to say yes to walking by faith and no to fear, and that's what real, genuine spirituality is all about. Mentally, I need to be growing and want to grow every day. Never stop learning. I want to be reading something new, learning something new, opening myself up to bigger things than I'd ever dreamed before. And then even with our physical, I want to never stop. I want to never stop. It's important for you are you getting better, growing, learning? Self-management also means acting on opportunities as you see them. That's another part of self-management. When I see opportunities, am I willing to walk through the door and seize the moment? Carpe diem, am I willing to seize the day? I'm not a victim. Life doesn't happen to me. I have opportunities all around me. Am I willing to seize those opportunities as they avail themselves? That's another part of self-management. And finally, self-management means I keep moving forward. Even when I face obstacles and setbacks, I don't stop. I don't say, well, I'm quitting. You can't quit. This is your whole life. And so you hit obstacles and you say, geez, this is the toughest obstacle I've ever been through in my life, but I'm going to keep moving forward every single day. I may get stuck in a place for a while I try to figure this out, but I'm going to keep knowing that that's the direction I'm facing, and I'm going to keep moving because that's the picture of an emotionally healthy person, not someone who stops because their mama died, or they stop because somebody broke up with them, or they stop because they didn't have the deal come through that they were supposed to come through that was going to change their life forever. Those things set us back. They hurt. But someone who is emotionally healthy and who is practicing self-management says, I'm walking forward. I'm going to keep moving. I'm continuing to move ahead. It might be scary, but I'm moving forward. Samson never learned it. And for these many thousands of years, he has been an example of a wasted life because he didn't understand self-management. You and I, even today, can decide we are going to put into practice those things that guardrail us to allow us to live the best emotionally healthy lives we can live. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 13 says this, cling to discipline. Do not relax your grip on it. Keep it, because it is your life. It is your life. And then Proverbs 13:18 says this, poverty and shame come to a person who ignores discipline. We want to practice self-management, self-control. How do you grade yourself? How are you doing? Let's be an emotionally healthy body of people and see what God can do in us. Would you bow your heads, please? Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for your word. Thank you for this thought about emotional intelligence that has captured us for these last weeks and will continue to be where we're thinking over the next couple of weeks. Our prayer is that we would become a church filled with people emotionally healthy, emotionally healthy. May that be our life. May that be our commitment. And we thank you for this. We pray this in Jesus' name.